I want to talk to you today about a concept that I think it changed somehow the literature in psychopathology, the concept of shame and how we define shame will really affect the way we work and really separates or differentiates different schools of psychotherapy.
There was not much literature on shame until about 1990. There were a few things written earlier by a couple of psychoanalysts, but the psychoanalytic literature dealt with guilt, not shame. And they used the term guilt often when they were inadvertently talking about shame, but it was not a central issue of it. I first got introduced to it when the head of the program committee for the International Transactional Analysis Association asked me if I would run a symposium on shame and edit a special issue of the Transactional Analysis Journal. And I said to him, I don't know anything about shame. He said, yes, you do. Every time I've seen you demonstrate how to do psychotherapy, you're dealing with shame. He said,
Mm.
I'll send you some books, some articles. He says, there's only two books that mention shame and only a couple articles. Well, they sat on my desk for a couple of months, and I was in my own psychoanalysis. And I said to my analyst, I've got this project and I can't do it. I don't know anything about shame. And he said, oh, I sat around. I said, what do you mean? Oh, he said, what do you think we've been talking about for the last couple of years? Never dawned on me. Well, I walked back across Central Park to my office, and my first client that sat down, I said, we never talk about shame. It opened up something entirely new for her. That night, when my men's group met, I said to the men's group, we never talk about shame. And again, it opened things up. And we had a series for the next several weeks of the most intimate conversations of each of the men finally confessing to the group. And I mean confessing because it had been a secret about the shame in their life. Well, that weekend, I went to my professional development seminar, and I was always blessed having this wonderful seminar of experienced psychotherapists. And I said, we never talk about shame. Well, I never got to give my lecture because people started talking so personally. And that opened up a year and a half long series of investigations with my clients and with each of the people in the seminar with their clients. And so we read what little literature was available. Now there's a flood of literature. If you go online and put in the word shame, you'll see that many people have opinions about it. Last week, I listened to a well-known Gestalt therapist talk about it, and I had the sense that they're dealing with shame so globally that it's hard to work with.
Uh-huh.
So that in our investigation at the Institute for Integrative Psychotherapy in New York City, we found that shame had five components, and each of them requires a whole different treatment approach. And each of those five components is a treatment direction in itself.
Okay.
Rather than dealing with shame as an emotion, I think we need to look at it in five parts. The
Mm.
first is the emotion of hurt.
Mm.
Hurt at not being accepted, not being cherished for who I am. My fundamental worth as a human being is not acceptable. Something is flawed in me. Hmm. So in therapy, we're going to have to deal with the hurt. Right? At the same time, shame is based on fear,
Mm.
fear of rejection as I am, so that my behavior or the way I look or act
Mhm.
is what will get me rejected. So you've
Yeah.
got the hurt and the fear intertwined together.
Yes. Yes.
At the same time, you have a disavowal of anger, right? That the person cannot allow themselves to feel or even express the anger because that would get them more likely rejected. So if they get angry at how they're being treated,
Mhm.
they'll have more trouble. So that they disavow the anger
Okay.
and then become compliant. So the compliance is the fourth part. You got the hurt, the fear, the hidden anger, and then compliance. In essence, I'll be as you define me.
Mhm.
And then the fifth part is the core belief something's wrong with me.
Yeah.
Now, if you take these five, these are always representative of a relational disruption. So that I think the core of shame is in relational disruption from humiliation, from constant criticism, from being put down, from being defined, from being ignored. All right. Ignoring, defining, humiliating comments are what is the beginning of that growing sense of shame. And shame is sort of like mold, it grows in the
Mhm.
dark, hidden places within the person and
Yeah.
can really take over and suffocate their life. I
Yeah.
think it is essential in psychotherapy that psychotherapists constantly think about shame and also think about how, in our attempt to be helpful, we are also stimulating a shame reaction in the client. So that's a long answer to your short question.
Yeah. I will ask you in a moment about what we do as therapists, as interventions. But before that, I was thinking it's this process, this whole uh, constellation that you just described is present in many different uh, ways in clients. Like it can be in early affect confusion or borderline. It can be in narcissistic defenses that we see in the beginning. So it has different faces, but the underneath is the same process.
I think so many people, no matter how else you define them and how you might diagnose them, are still dealing with shame. I think it is a human condition that
Mhm.
all of us grow up in. I watch little kids, kindergarten age, or certainly by first 6 or 7, 8 years of age, actively humiliating each other. I mean, shaming begins very young when one child does not measure up to the sports capacity of another child or to the reading ability of another child.
Yeah.
They feel that as a rupture in the relationship.
And you believe it can be global to the person, like affecting the whole experiences of a person, or specifically about one aspect? Like I can have shame for my uh, a body part or a characteristic of mine or something that's
Well, certainly shame for body part is very common, particularly for adolescents. That's a very difficult time of life or many adolescents, no matter how they look, don't measure up to some ideal standard.
The puberty, actually.
So you can have sort of a global sense of shame, and you can also have shame in specific situations.
Mhm. And now you were telling about the intervention and
Okay.
therapist stance.
Intervention then has to be, I think, a five-part treatment perspective. We have to deal with the painful memories, the painful experiences of the rupture in the relationship, or the person's conclusion, the way they make sense of it, is that I'm not acceptable for the who I am. This is why the sense of presence of the psychotherapist,
Mhm.
the therapist making use of the concept of unconditional positive regard, or making use of Martin Buber's I thou relationship
Yeah.
becomes so important that our transactions with the client are constantly respectful of the who that they are. Yeah. Then there's that constant fear of rejection for my behavior. So I'm always watching how the clients are being very careful in presenting themselves to me, how they're on their good behavior, so to speak,
Yes.
um, and how they are reluctant to tell me what's missing in the relationship. So early in the therapy, I want to create the kind of relationship where they can tell me what they don't like about our therapy relationship, that we can have that kind of honest conversation. Um, and also so that my behavior is not such that I'm implying that what they're doing is wrong.
Mhm.
So I want to create a safe environment for them to fully express themselves without any fear that we're going to lose the connection in our relationship. Then I want the person to have a sense of knowing how they comply. You know, if some teacher thought they were stupid, they became stupid. If somebody thought they were ugly, they didn't see their own personal beauty. If somebody thought they were uh, body inadequate, they didn't use their body, they hid it. And so I'm looking for all the various ways they have been compliant in order not to be angry at the humiliation or the criticism or being ignored. So at some point, we're going to work with uncovering any potential hidden anger, as
Mhm.
well as how they were compliant with how someone else described them. And then I want to eventually come back to their core belief of something's wrong with me and challenge that belief and help them realize that that was someone else's attitude towards them, or at least what they imagined someone else's attitude to be. So you've got a five-part treatment plan, which will take time. And I jump around from one of those, they're not sequential. I'll move from one to the other and then back again. And sometimes only 2 or 3 minutes in a session. It's not that we spend the whole session on it because we're
Mhm.
dealing with other things. But I keep coming back to that session after session, at least in my organizing the therapy.
Mhm. I was thinking I had this experience that um, clients who have been years in therapy and have a very clear idea of their problems, their pathology, as they label it, and that experience has become also shaming for them. So it takes a lot of time also to pathologize or de-shame what has been labeled in therapy or in analysis.
Yeah. That's one of the reasons I don't use a pathological perspective.
Yeah.
I see what other therapists might call psychopathology as the person's desperate attempt to try to struggle with relational disruptions and to have some kind of a consistent sense of self.
Mhm.
Now, in teaching psychotherapy, I have to adjust to what other people think of. So I think in terms of borderlines or narcissistic or obsessive compulsive, but I don't think of it as a diagnosis as much as this is how the person managed to cope.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. One of the most important things I learned from integrative psychotherapy lens was to be able to define persons' problems in developmental aspect and have a humanistic view of it rather than labeling it.
I'm always looking for the wounded child, or I should say the wounded children, because in the client there are several different ages that have
Yeah.
different kinds of wounds or neglects.
Yeah. And I would like you to also explain a little bit about what you call self-righteousness as a double defense. Mm,
Self-righteousness doesn't translate to some European languages. So when I'm in Europe, I refer to it as arrogance.
mhm,
It's a defense against the sense of shame. I think the core underneath it is potential shame, but the person doesn't want to feel it. It's awful. So instead of that sense of something's wrong with me,
mhm,
there's nothing wrong with me. The problem is in others. So it shifts the shame, and people who are in that self-righteous or arrogant position are often engaging in humiliating and defining and criticizing others. So you have to work carefully with that sense of arrogance and self-righteousness before you can get to the underlying shame. And this is certainly the case in, if we want to use the term narcissism, or with a self-centered person. That sense, self-centeredness is to stay away from that internal shame by seeing themselves as nothing's wrong with me, the problem's in other people. And I don't have an easy solution for how you get there. Um, but I know that when I have such a client, I spend a lot of time listening to them. I spend a lot of time empathetically reflecting back to them what they have said. It sometimes takes a couple of years to build that level of trust
mhm.
before I can start even looking at their own shameful experiences.
Sure. So that that becomes conscious, kind of.
That's right. Yeah.
Thank you very much.
You're most welcome. I've appreciated these interviews with you, and I wish you a good day.
You too.
Bye for
Thank you.
now.
Goodbye.